It's been quite a while since there was that incursion of Brazil in the negotiations with Iran. What is now the State Department assessment of Brazil's and Turkey's position during those negotiations to contain Iran's nuclear program? At that time, I remember the Brazilian official discourse was that it was all in accordance with the State Department in the United States, but that was apparently not the whole story. So what could you tell us about that episode right now?
Well, what I think is important now is where we are and where we're headed. And in my discussions with officials here in Brazil, we certainly talked about Iran. It is of great concern to the entire international community. Iran has isolated itself from the international community in its refusal to really address the concerns that the international community, the United States and Brazil included, of course, have about their nuclear weapons intentions and their program. The International Atomic Energy Agency was just in Iran over the last few days trying to get answers to those questions. The UN has asked for answers to those questions, both through the agency and more generally through the Security Council. And in fact, the United States is part of what is known as the P5+1, which are the permanent members of the Security Council, along with the European Union and Germany, to say to Iran, we are open to engagement. We are open to discussions and talks about your nuclear program if you're ready to come to the table. We have yet to see that Iran is ready to come to the table. And so in the meantime, the entire world community has moved forward with sanctions against Iran because we want Iran to understand that they must engage because the world community is quite concerned.
Do you see any specific role for Brazil in those negotiations? For instance, Brazil might eventually approach Iran to offer that, again, as you said, if Iran wants to come up to the table and discuss. Do you see any specific role for Brazil in those negotiations?
Well, I think that Brazil, as a very important power in the world, is someone with whom the United States and the P5+1 will consult, as we do with Turkey, of course. So I think that all of these countries in the world that care so much about nuclear disarmament want to make sure that there aren't additional nuclear weapons powers in the world, ought to be part of our regular consultation and are. And I was glad to be able to be here and include that topic in the many topics that were discussed with officials here in Brazil.
But again, let me just be more specific on that. Do you think it will be desirable that Brazil offers itself to go and try to bring Iran to the discussion table, or we are not at that point right now?
I think that any country that has a relationship with Iran ought to encourage Iran to come to the negotiating table with the P5+1 and ensure that the concerns of the international community are addressed. And so we welcome all countries to encourage Iran to do the right thing, make the right choice, and really take away the concerns the international community has.